get pigeonholed so much because they think there's so much hate. And there's so much rage. There are so many other emotions on this album. At the same time, there's hope. There's wisdom, because these are things that made us who we are.
The only thing you really know about me is that's all you'll ever know.
Slipknot's darkest and heaviest album is, without a doubt, Iowa. Released in 2001, it was the product of a time of extreme stress in the band's life. Crippling depression and unrestrained addiction created an immensely popular album that was more death metal than nu metal. Its stories are well known, but many aspects of it remain overlooked. Corey Taylor, lead singer for Slipknot, sat down for an interview with VH1, a sister channel of MTV. 9/11 occurred just days after the release of Iowa, and Slipknot's music had been pulled from the airwaves as many stations thought that their violent sound and evocative imagery were unacceptable in a time of extreme grief. Slipknot, an act that associated itself with satanic motifs during the Iowa cycle, was under constant examination from the media. Despite this, Corey espoused that Iowa was something far more complex. This interview struck me, and I was determined to find positivity in a notoriously messed up project. I initially looked up concert footage. I looked at some of the highlights from a show in St. Paul in October of that year on a whim. The show was awesome, and the final song of the night was Surfacing. It's a song about open-mindedness with a profanity-filled chorus. Corey introduces it as the and grabs an American flag from an audience member. He whips it above his head and wears it like a cape as the chorus hits. The song crescendos, and he holds it in front of himself as the cameras slowly fade out. Surfacing, a song written as you to the outside world, feels more unifying than ever, and the united rage and pain of the audience and the performers transforms it into something profound and incredibly patriotic. The chaos of the music, which the media love to connect to senseless violence, is a cathartic salve for the psyches of the crowd. Their music, for all intents and purposes, was transformative, as Corey claimed. American patriotism was at an all-time high in the wake of 9/11. Grief, distress, and a multitude of other emotions were cataloged and disseminated in the public consciousness. Fear and grief are highlighted the most in the historical accounts. Fear wasn't the primary factor of 9/11. Thousands of text messages from the day of were leaked in 2009. Researchers examined the content and published their findings in the Psychological Science Journal. The anxiety and sadness of the texts increased over the course of the day, as news of the initial impacts, the collapse of the towers, and the announcements from President Bush and the mayor were aired. Outright hate and anger spiked after the initial strike and continued on, only briefly stopping as the president addressed the nation. The hatred accumulated as the fear slowly increased. The U.S. wanted vengeance, and the attack immediately triggered moral outrage. Citizens desperately looked for catharsis as they waited for a significant military response to the perpetrators. Slipknot, with their shocking masks and brutal sound, provided a perfect outlet. Their concerts were packed, even as radio stations tried to keep Iowa off the airwaves. Iowa was created in ignorance of what would occur. Joey and Paul, the drummer and bassist, were hard at work in late 2000. They'd wrapped up touring for the self-titled and used the break to work on some material for the next highly anticipated project. They brought their stuff to LA and met up with the rest of the crew. The break hadn't helped at all. The entire band was at each other's throats, and massive substance abuse soured their relationships. Misery, resentment, self-loathing, and despair became the primary subjects handled by Iowa. The lead singer growled, screamed, and wailed over lyrics that covered everything from their sudden fame to hanging out with a dead body. Opinions about the band had always been polarizing. Their debut album was critically acclaimed, and the pressure was on to deliver another groundbreaking follow-up. The pressure was on from corporate to make something more radio-friendly. Meanwhile, other groups were horrified by their wild shows and masks. Slipknot went on the Conan O'Brien show in 2000. As you might imagine, audiences were successfully shocked by the shock act. You've got the visuals of a singer wearing a peeling crash test dummy mask that's literally about to fall off his face, with dreads superglued to it, on stage with 8 other maniacs. Slipknot grew in infamy, and the pressure from the outside world increased. They wouldn't understand how much of an impact their pain would have. External pressure manifested in a powerful visual aesthetic as well. The band reached out to the special effects artist Screaming Mad George, or SMG. SMG had worked on visual effects and gore for a multitude of movies, including Predator and a couple of the Nightmare on Elm Street films. He sat down with the members to talk about what they envisioned and took life casts of their faces to make custom-fit masks. The results perfectly matched the vibe of what they were going for. Many were intricate versions of their self-titled masks, while others, like number 6's, underwent insane changes to truly capture their outlook and alienation. Several of them were made out of foam latex, which acts like a sponge for bodily secretions. You can see Corey's mask sweat during their live DVD. The latex slowly rotted away, creating a decayed look as their tours went on. Even the imagery of the album's packaging is intriguing. The interior art featured the golden ratio in pi, fitting with the simple equation of the track people equal. A goat fetus adorns a section of the interior, and the head of a dead goat graces the iconic cover. Words like scapegoat come to mind, especially considering that Slipknot would be a conduit for societal anger and fear in the coming months. A flat, reflective panel serves as a mirror. The twisted music is augmenting the dark thoughts of the listener. The exterior was also covered in this material to further communicate this idea. Slipknot, with their escaped insane asylum inmate vibe and masked stage presence, were labeled and associated with Satanism off-rip by many of their most frightened critics. They took that fear and used it to draw attention to their overarching message, most prominently with their track, The Heretic Anthem.
Dissecting
which they performed live on late-night television. They played a song that straight up mocked the industry. It's cooled off over the years, but their adaptation of these symbols was a hot topic at the time. The barcodes on their jumpsuits and the nature of the chorus of the Heretic Anthem displayed their dismay at the packaging of modern music. Despite their co-opting of these elements, none of the members ever practiced. Well, that's an outright lie. They actually practiced for like an entire week before they went on the European tour, but by practiced, I mean their deliberate choice to embrace these motifs tied into the pigeonholing and mental anguish they experienced after self-titled. Iowa was a middle finger raised at the outside world by people who were dramatically falling apart at the seams. I can't help but reflect on what Corey said in the VH1 interview. The process of creating this album almost killed its creators. It was full of abject misery, unless you were Paul Gray, who claimed that he loved the process. The final product has stood the test of time, and it's amazing that you can go through it and examine layers of past and present trauma. You can grasp the variety of feelings that made such a fantastic, heavy album. It's shocking, depraved, destructive, angsty, and edgy. It isn't comfortable, it's overwrought and chaotic. Iowa is a survival story, my favorite type of story. The band survived the process despite the immense pain. The hope and wisdom that Corey talks about lie with how the listener responds. It's a conduit for a lot of dark things, but if used correctly, can be positively transformative. I love to work out to the album. It's by far my most played at the gym. I've achieved PRs to Disasterpiece.
Once again, it's me and no one else. I can't remember if there was that someone else. Without mine, it's not fair. It's out of my hands and it's shaking. You'll never take my advantage. No attack, no attack. People made no attack. People made no attack. We're missing nothing to do. It's up, but I do nothing.
And ended cross-country runs listening to the end of My Plague. It's strange, but I think of positive memories when I dwell in Iowa. The concerts from 2001 to 2002 are another example. The band was exhausted from non-stop touring, and by the conclusion of their world tour, were on bad terms. They wrote songs in anguish, and then played those songs non-stop. Slipknot was constantly reminded of the process as a result of their album's popularity. The audience, though, was graced with an opportunity to express their rage at a world that had been flipped upside down. Iowa was made by flawed and messed up people who took the darkest part of their life and made it into something visceral that speaks to the human consciousness. That's where the hope lies. Alright, that's it for tonight. Thank you so much for watching. At the time of writing, I learned that there's a book that kind of made the same conclusions that will be coming out when this video releases. I'll leave a link to it in the description. I'm kind of annoyed that someone else kind of reached some of the same conclusions and connections between Iowa and 9/11, but I look forward to reading it. To clarify, that was only after I was already partway through the same old process. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this little standalone video. I'll see you around. Take care and have a great night.
Nine, 4, 3, 2, 1.